Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Not Too Comic Book. This being a show where it's about TV shows that are adaptations of comic books. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about Lucifer Season 5, Episode 13. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. I do appreciate that opening we have with Linda. She's stalking someone. Immediately, I was like, it's her daughter, Adriana. I figured as much, because like that's the only person she'd be so dedicated to, because especially for Maze being like, no, it's dangerous, don't do it. It's like Maze is the only other person that knows the truth about it, so I figured it had to be something like that, which I think is interesting, once again, how the cases and, Lucifer's life kind of coincide, because obviously talking to Amenadiel, because it's like, right, all you've ever been doing is distracting yourself recently about Dad's circumstances. The fact of the matter is you have been, you did your prank on, Dan and everything, and it's like, he's fine. I was planning that for weeks. Now it's time for me to like learn to do the French horn. He was even saying like he was working on like a little model ship in a bottle thing. I guess it's because of that a couple episodes ago, that dude from the YSD episode, that drug. Because I think that was like 2 episodes ago. That dude was working on stuff like that maybe like Lucifer needed it to kind of distract him and keep him focused on something else other than this. But for him, it's like, right, Dad's retiring, so there's going to have to be someone else stepping in his place and saying, like, basically, Amenadiel is like, it's like, basically, you've been working your entire life for this, which I think that's a really interesting element of the episode, like how he's interacting with different people about it. He interacts with other, like, religious people from different backgrounds, being like, what would they want in a God? And he explains that to Dan and being like, yeah, so my dad's retiring, so I'm going to become God. It's like, wait, what? He's like, you're going to, like, be in charge of, like, the whole world and everything. He's like, yeah, it's a big responsibility. And obviously Dan talks about the fact is he prefers the nitty gritty. He's like, yeah, I couldn't even make it as a lieutenant, but you've always been the big picture dude, and it's like, you're a good guy, so I know you'll kind of nail this. But then that starts getting inside of his head that it's like, right, I am a big, I actually prefer the nitty gritty myself, the smaller aspects of everything, and I thought that was so fascinating. So let's kind of finish that up before we kind of circle back to everything with the case and Lucifer and Linda. But he ends up talking to Ella, which I think is kind of, especially in his case. I'm curious, because we haven't really seen his powers actively working on her, because once again, his power is about, people's, fate being reflected back at them, their love for God being reflected back at them. And so maybe it is there just subtly, or maybe just Amenadiel being who he is, it just resonates so easily that it doesn't manifest itself necessarily in that way, or like the same way that Lucifer's desire powers work, or Michael's fears work. Like, because you could never really tell he was necessarily leaning into it, but I think this is just kind of just Amenadiel being Amenadiel. I don't think this is like necessarily his powers kicking it. Maybe it was, but it was an interesting conversation he had with Ella. He's like, basically, pretend I'm God. Like, would you change anything? She's like, no. Like, basically, that's what all faith's about, kind of acceptance. It's like, yeah, she's like, God loves me. I know that. Because it's, and for her, I thought it was actually this beautiful, like, I mean, it's this very, it's beautiful and poetic in its own way, but also, like, sad with what she said. That basically for her, it's like, I've got darkness in me, and God loves me regardless. But for her, it's like, I don't think I deserve that love. And then, Amenadiel being like, if I was God right now, I would tell you, that's not right. Ella, like, take some of that faith you have in him and put it in yourself. Because once again, people telling her, remind her she's a good person, but she doesn't think so. Like, everything with Pete, like, I think she's felt it for a while, but Pete really pushed it over the edge for her, where she's like, yeah, there's darkness in me. I'm not the good person I try to be. I think it makes her question her whole thing of, like, me trying to be good. Like, maybe, because for her, it's like, she's trying to go to the extreme, like being the bubbly personality, being the great person she is, trying to, probably in her mind it's like, right, I'm just trying not to be my family. My family leans one way, especially some of my siblings, so I need to go the hard extreme, So I think that's why she kind of, so maybe in her mind she's like overcompensating in certain regards. But for her, she tells him in adult, it's like, I'll try. So I'm interested to kind of see what that means for Ella's journey going forward, so. But at the end of the day, quickly finishing up Amenadiel's side of things, when he talks to Lucifer at the end of the episode, he brings up the fact is that he doesn't want to be God. He's like, yeah, I'm worthy of it. But for him, it's like, I've built so much of a life for myself here. Like, I used to look down on humans, kind of still did to, until the musical episode when that kind of snapped him out of it. But it's like, right. But the fact is, here on Earth, I love my life here on Earth. I built a family. I have friends. Like, I don't want things to change, and obviously becoming God would be, but he also is conflicted because it's like, right, it's also my celestial duty. I mean, he's like, well, one, it's not like your dad expressly said, like, oh, I want one of you guys to take over. It's like, yeah, I'm keeping the seat vacant for now while I kind of, figure things out, but it's like, I'm sure, once again, he has his plans and everything, just no one's in the inner circle knowing what's what, so maybe we'll find out later on, but so there's that side of things, which I thought was kind of an interesting side story, which is obviously pushing like the main plot forward anyway, so it's weird to kind of call that a side story, but nevertheless, this case involves, ultimately, first and foremost, Lucifer talking to Amenadal about, like, the fact of the matter is, because he's trying to figure out everything between him and Chloe, but also it's like Amenadal got in his head, like, oh yeah, like, therapy's actually been good for you. You're very mindful. You think things through. You're not as impulsive, which he was like, take that back. You know what? Therapy has ruined me because he was always a very impulsive person. Yes, he can be impulsive and just kind of selfish, but he is more thoughtful than he was at the beginning. So he has grown and changed a lot. So he's trying to be more impulsive. So when Chloe comes to him saying, like, for her, it's like, you'll literally live forever, but I could literally be waiting around forever for an answer. So it's like, I just need to know where we stand. Like, are we a couple or not? And he's like, yes. And it's like, let's stop overthinking things, and we're a couple. Yes. And you can tell his reluctancy in it. And I thought it was really interesting as we kind of got into that. But let's kind of build out the episode more as we, break down everything. It turns out this case in particular, which for one, I love that when they come to the crime scene, Ella's like, you know what? I'm not going to ask any questions. You guys are the couple that cried relationship. I'm not going to ask. Okay, fine, I'm going to ask. She's like, yep, we're definitely a couple now. She's like, yeah, oh my God, about time, Ella's been their biggest cheerleader. But obviously Dan kind of invites them to the crime scene. It's like, yeah, this is a complicated one because the murder suspect who's confessed is Linda, which obviously none of them want to believe it, even arresting her. And even Maze being like, what? There's no way Linda did it. It's like, what did you do? How'd you kill him? I did it good and hard, and it's like, you didn't even think this through, which both Chloe and Lucifer saw through. It's like, yes, like, the weapon she has isn't the same weapon that was used to kill Mr. Sterling, and it's also Lucifer's. Besides, it's the doctor. Come on, there's no way she would actually do it. So they actually finally get her talking because Maze is like, you tell them the truth or I'm going to. So it's like, fine, I'll tell you guys the truth. About Adriana, how she's kind of been stalking her. Just like, no, like, I figured she was kind of troubled, and it turns out I was right. So for her, it's like, there's got to be something that, Adriana got mixed up in something. But Adriana turns herself in and confesses, like, yeah, I'm the one responsible for this. I did this. I did that. I'm the one that did this. Obviously, Linda knows that she's lying. And so for her, it's a thing of, so ultimately, Linda's trying to say, like, God, there's obviously got to be more to this, even though Adriana's confessing. And slowly over the case, they end up finding out more. It's like, right, there was this scary guy. His name is Clive. And then we get Maze's side of things, because obviously she's going to look into this because, like, let's face it, Linda's her bestie. Well, one of her besties. Because I think, like, she's got her own, like, crew. Like, Chloe and Ella and Linda are all her besties. But I think Linda was her first bestie. But she's looking into this, and lo and behold, who does she run into? Like, she finds some mysterious person in Clive's place, and it ends up being Eve. It's one of those situations where I wish I didn't know that Eve was in this ahead of time. And the only reason why I know it is because I didn't notice it the first time I watched the trailer, but I had watched the trailer twice. So I noticed it the second time through. I brought it up during my trailer discussion. So I kind of wish I hadn't noticed that myself. I wish I had just watched it once and didn't go back and watch that a second time, because that would have been a nice reveal. Because I knew it was her immediately, even with the mask on, just seeing her eyes. I was like, that's totally got to be Eve. But it's also like, yo, she's handling herself good against Maze and everything. And then I was like, oh, why isn't she announcing herself or whatever? And it's like, oh, Eve? It's like, oh, hey, Maze. And the way she's acting and stuff like that, where she was kind of reluctant to tell her, I was like, oh, you become a bounty hunter too, and you don't want Maze to think you're just kind of copying her. And it's like, yeah, I was kind of out, searching for myself and everything, and yeah, I became a bounty hunter. But you could tell there was more to it, especially with like, oh, I want to follow your teachings. I'm like, you're using this as an excuse to get close to Maze, because it seemed like at certain points it almost looks like you could see her checking Maze out. Like at some point, it's like she's standing behind Maze, and you see her kind of looking down and looking up, like, oh, it's like, yo, you hardcore checking Maze out. Okay, and so obviously they're going to be working together. I actually thought that was kind of interesting how they did, but I guess like they did that specifically. No interactions amongst the other characters. We don't get any Eve and Chloe interactions or Eve and Lucifer. So I thought that was kind of fascinating. But I think the reason why is because we got plenty of those in season 4. This is kind of about repairing things between her and Maze, so that was kind of meant to be the focus of it. That's why, like, the entire episode, she's just kicking it with Maze. But obviously they bring Linda along, like, obviously after they find out about this Clive connection, and there's a woman named Jamie. So, because Owen, Adriana's boyfriend, kind of threw that out there. So all three of them are kind of going on a little bit of a sting, or rather stakeout. And Linda's kind of made to stay behind with Lucifer, because they were like, yeah, she's like, you guys brought me along for my expertise on the case. I was like, yeah, but also because you said that you would just tell us if we didn't bring you. So really quickly about Linda, I thought was interesting. It's like, oh, you got the firearm and everything. She's like, well, I did get brutally tortured by the goddess, and the fact is that my child was kidnapped by demons, so yes, that's why I got the gun, but I brought it along because I thought Adriana was in trouble, and turns out she was. But interestingly enough, Lucifer's sticking behind, and once again, kind of making a case about him, because he kind of was doing a little bit of a reverse psychology, being like, oh yeah, everything between me and the detective is good. And Linda at first was kind of like, what? Oh, okay, sure. And then immediately being like, I know what you're doing, Lucifer. You're trying to get me to talk about your relationship. And he was like, okay, fine, if you're going to ask so many questions about it, you know? But for Linda, it's just kind of like, it's like, right, I'm dealing with my own thing right now in this moment, you know? So obviously them pretending to be a couple and everything, and I love that they're both kind of throwing their baggage out there, and it's just kind of like, yeah, about the perfect relationship, and it's like, oh yeah, what about my daughter? And it's like, Jamie's like, oh wow, you guys were able to see all that in the art, and you're like, ooh. And she's like, well, that's what I love about art, it's subjective, and it's like, oh god, that worked out. But obviously Linda thinks she's got it all figured out. It's like, oh, Jamie's running like a, you know, stolen art and stuff like that. Clive's like her scary muscle guy. But obviously for Lucifer, it's like, well, we don't have any leverage to kind of put it that way. So it's like, right, we're setting up everything. Like, I'm going to pay for like some exclusive paintings to kind of get the inside scoop on everything. And it turns out like, it's like, because at first when Linda and them go outside, which ultimately Lucifer ended up buying a painting, it's like, oh, I never got, she's like, you know, Chloe's like, I normally don't get anything off of a sting. And it's like, and Linda's like, aren't you mad? She's like, no, Lucifer immediately called me after you guys decided to go in there, and kind of, I was listening in the whole time. So yeah, it's all big. We're going to operate a sting and stuff like that, which we have Maze and Eve kind of staking out the place. And, that was a really interesting, like, obviously she's playing down, she's like, oh, why do we pick this particular place? I was like, here, it's like a flash grenade. She's like, we don't need this. And she's like, oh, right. And she's like, okay, cut it out, Eve. Like, what are you really up to? Like, I saw your moves back there. You're no novice. You're actually really good at this. So I'm trying to understand, like, why'd you come back here? And for her, it's like, I didn't tell you the full story. I said I was happy as being a bounty hunter. And even when I became a bounty hunter, I realized I really enjoyed it because I was doing it with you. And then there was also this part where, like, she's like, I came here to kind of try and win you back. And Maze is like, you broke my heart. She's like, really? That's amazing. I mean, that's awful. That's awful. And I think there's a part of her being like, that's amazing, because I was like, whoa, I broke your heart. So that means there's something to repair. So that means you do care about me. You know, so because she was like, yeah, I became a bounty. Remember the case we worked on back in season 1, you know? And she was like, barely. It was like, well, it probably meant like was kind of any other day for you, but it kind of meant a lot to me. But to hear like, oh, I broke your heart. It's like, no, that means you care about me. So it's like, if there was a broken heart, that means there was hurt. And if there was hurt, that means there was love, you know? Hurt is a sign of caring. Once again, I'm pulling out my Kingdom Hearts bag any chance I get. Just because like that, ever since I heard that line in Kingdom Hearts 3, like that's always resonated with me. Like, yeah, hurting means that you cared about someone. It's part of caring. It's like, it sucks to hurt, but it means if you didn't hurt, then maybe it didn't mean as much to you in the first place. Like, hurting means like you cared. That you cared, like even despite the circumstances of what might have led to that relationship ending. So that's where I think Eve was coming from in that regard. But they sneak in there and confront Clive. And in the process, Eve gets shot by him. And we didn't see the aftermath, but Maze went hard on Clive, like punching and kicking the crap out of him. And it's like, oh, like in that moment, she got scared, you know, for Eve. And luckily, Eve got surgery. And let's kind of follow this aspect of the episode all the way through. So luckily, when it's all said and done, Eve's okay. And Maze said for the first time, she's been afraid before, but never like this, because it's like she's never been in a situation where someone she loves is in danger like that. Like she's been, yeah, like it's a little different from like, yeah, the other people that are in your lives, like Linda, Chloe, Ella, like they're your friends, Dan, your friends, associates. But it's like this is the first time like she's truly in love, you know. And for her, it's like a thing of like, right, if this is what it means to have a soul, I don't want to ever feel this again. But it's like, yeah, she's willing to take that step forward, and she got her mother's ring she got the ring, yeah, her mother's ring from Lucifer that has her mom's immortality. Does it even work like that? I mean, Lucifer's had it on the entire time, so we don't know if it even works. Like, would it even work like that? And it was kind of like, oh, that's awesome. And it's like, yeah, we can be together forever. And then Eve's like, yeah, but I don't want that. She's like, I saw what immortality did to my son Cain. You saw that, and it's like, you saw it firsthand as well. And it's like immortality. And once again, it's, death is mortality is a gift. It makes you appreciate life because you know how limited it is. It makes it all worthwhile. But for Maze, it's like, no, I'm not going to lose you. Take the ring. It's like, I'm trying to protect you. It's like, I get it. She's like, I love you. And Eve's like, I love you too. But like, but for Maze, it's like, that's the only way they'll be in a relationship, if you take this ring and live forever, because I'm not going to lose someone again. It's like the sad part of, that's a part of love that, it can come and go in your life, but also when you do find that person, sadly that person can leave you, but it makes you cherish those moments. It's it's the finer details of life, it's like those moments, because a minute ago I talked about that a little bit with Ella, about like enjoying like the small moments in life with Charlie. That those are the moments that matter the most. So because once again, kind of being God, you won't get caught up in the minute details in certain regards. So I think that kind of resonates in this regard as well, because you can lose someone you love, but the moments you had, there's pain and hurt that comes afterward, but there's also the beauty of the life you had together, those moments that you were able to cherish. So it's kind of sad, especially, this is also Maze reacting from she lost her mom. She never got to say everything she wanted to say to her mom, but it's also the same thing, her mom gave up her immortality. Sadly, life didn't work out the way she wanted it to, and Maze never got to really have those interactions with her mom like she wanted to. So she already lost someone that she'll never get back, and she doesn't want to go through that again, so she kind of walks away. So hopefully things can get remedied on that front, that maybe we will see things kind of get better. I'm really interested to see kind of where that story goes, because I think that's definitely an interesting love story, and especially like as Maze is on her own journey, growing a soul and everything. So I thought that was kind of fascinating. But ultimately they got Clive, and it turns out Linda was right, about everything, but it turns out Adriana's prints are on the gun, but Linda being like, no, that can't be the case, like, there's got to be something else to it, and he can't, and Lucifer's like, don't say because, and she's like, because if she's broken, it's my fault, I failed, I gave her up, and like, I wasn't there to kind of put her in a position where she could have a better life, I'm the reason why she's broken. But then Lucifer brings up the fact is that, he's like, me and the detective, and she's like, Jesus, Lucifer, I get it. You're doing this again where you're just making it all about you, you self-centered. It's like, the fact is that rather than just being here for me right now, I need you. And rather than being there, you're focusing the entire thing about you like you always do. This is the moment where I need you there to be there for me, and you aren't. She's like, that just proves that, maybe you're right. Maybe therapy didn't work. That means I failed as a therapist. Not only did I fail my daughter, I failed you. And then she sees Chloe taking Adriana away. It's like, what's that about? It's like, we are questioning her again. And it's like, why would you? All the evidence points to her. It's like, yeah, but you believe she's innocent. And it's like, yes, my self-centeredness aside, I am trying to help you. We all are. So let's go see what your daughter has to say. Now, I thought that was kind of a sweet scene. And Adriana kind of finally admits, like, right, I ended up like in a desperate situation. We had like no money because her mom got sick, and because Lucifer's like, what do you truly desire? It's like, I want to protect my mom. My mom's sick. She needed money, so she got mixed up in all of this. And no one usually gets hurt until this situation, but for her, it's like, I couldn't get in contact with Clive, so I ended up, showing up there, but by the time I showed up, he was already dead. But it's like, no, Clive was at like a strip club or something at the time. But Adriana was like, no, I tried to, there's no way I could have texted him, because apparently, like, there was a text that came from you to tell him that the job was off. She's like, no, I didn't contact him. I couldn't get in contact with him at all, because I didn't find out until the day of that Mr. Sterling was coming back. So, I was in a movie on Friday, so there's no way I would have let him know ahead of time. And in that moment, Linda kind of figured it out, especially when Ella kind of she had figured it out beforehand, but Lucifer and Chloe figured it out afterwards, because it's like, right, there was only one fingerprint up there, and it just had to be Adriana's. If she had held a gun, more than one fingerprint would be up there. Plus, there's stuff up there showing that it was Scotch tape that was used. So she was framed. So who would be the person to do this? And the moment that came up, I was like, it was her boyfriend. He's the only person close enough to this. And Linda confronts him, you know. Why he did what he did, I'm not quite sure. I mean, I guess it was a situation. Well, I think the whole point was like he was trying to like make, because we never really got into like why he did it. I think they were talking about he was just doing it for the money, like trying to get more of it himself. But Sterling came in and he ended up killing him in the process, which is so effed up. You ended up framing your own girlfriend, you know. And Linda's like, the fact is, I couldn't protect my child before, but I'm going to protect her now. But luckily, you know, Lucifer and Chloe showed up in time to arrest him. It's like, we have the evidence to take you down, Owen. And Lucifer has her lower the gun and hugs Linda. It's like, you were able to protect your daughter. So she has a moment with Adriana where it's kind of like, hey, don't I know you? It's like, she's like, no. It's like, oh, right, the house. It's like, right, yeah, that was you. Oh, they helped you out? Yeah, because she's like, these are my friends. They were helping with something important. I'm glad they know that they helped you out too, you know. So she couldn't bring herself to say it at the end. But Lucifer, she's like, right, you got my undivided attention. She's like, no, I want to make this all about you. And so in that moment, they're talking, you know. It's like, why didn't you tell her? And she was like, I don't know. She's like, it's probably not going to make a lot of sense of like why I didn't. But Lucifer's like, no, it does. The fact of the matter is, you want to be close to her. You want to get to know her, because for her, it's like she's afraid. Like, what if I open myself up to Adriana and she rejects me? And she's like, but he's like, I get it. She's so good and so perfect, and you just feel unworthy. And then, you know, you have Linda saying, maybe you'd be a good therapist, Lucifer, and they kind of laugh. But I'm like, that could, I don't know. That'd be an interesting thing, therapist Lucifer. I mean, I guess he plays some role in that already, because he takes a lot of what he learns and kind of applies it to certain cases, and obviously kind of always has, but like in a more official capacity, actually being the therapist, filling Linda's role in certain regards, I think would be interesting. Could definitely see that happening more. I don't think he's ever done that necessarily, been in her shoes in that regard, but like I said, to some extent with every case, because he's taking what he's learned from Linda, obviously applying it, you know, what he wants from it, and it applies to the case, so he kind of still fills those shoes regardless, but still. So now it's kind of a situation about like what I'm going to do about Chloe. Like, he does want to be with her, but he just feels unworthy. Like, he's not good enough because she's perfect in her own eye, which no one's perfect. But in his mind, it's like, she's such a good person, and I'm just like the mess that I am. So when Aminadab was like, I'm not going to take, he's like, oh, I'm going to become, Lucifer made his decision, and that's why he decided. I thought he, you know, based on the trial, I was wondering like, oh, does he decide to take it? Because he's like, no, I'm going to do a better job than my dad. It's actually a really sweet reason why he wants to do it, because it's like, if I can become God and do a good job, then maybe, just maybe, I'll be worthy enough to be with the detective. I was like, that's actually super sweet and a little altruistic. Yeah, it's selfish in its own right, but still altruistic in its own right, because it's like, yeah, it's actually a really sweet reason why you want it to be a roundabout way of proving that you are worthy. It's like, if I can be God and prove myself that, like, then yes, I will be deserved. And I think that's so sweet that, you know, I'm sure Chloe would be like, whoa, you're putting me on a pedestal? You're comparing being worthy of being God to being worthy of being in a relationship with me? Like, that doesn't track. I'm sure that's going to be a conversation we have in the future, but based on the trailer and stuff like that, like, I have some ideas of where we're going to go, but it's still going to be interesting to see how we ultimately get there. Oh yeah, something else I completely forgot to like talk about as well is the fact is that at the very end of things, Adriana showed up and she's like, oh yeah, you weren't asking them for help with something else. You were asking them for help from me. And because she had kind of pieced it together that Linda was her mom. Like, for her, it's like, anytime you see anyone that's kind of slightly familiar, that looks kind of similar to you, you kind of start thinking. So the moment I saw you at the open house, just at one time, it start crossing my mind. We kind of look a little similar. So, but it makes you wonder, is like, do a lot of adopted kids feel that? Like, do you, like, especially if you don't know, like, because I think that's a part of, like, I mean, I think it depends on the person, like their experiences and everything, whether or not they want to know where they came from. So it's a situation of whether or not you really want to, like, look for your biological parents or not. So on some level, she kept probably wanting to look. And so anytime, like, she saw someone that looked like her, I was like, oh, maybe this is person and this and that. And obviously it's a situation of, like, you know, Linda was like, I didn't know whether you would reject me or not, but it does seem like she's willing to give Linda a shot, which I think is pretty dope. I was also worried, like, well, the moment she got introduced to Charlie, would she feel a certain way? But it's like, no. She was like, hey, hi, Charlie, I'm your sister. I was like, oh, that's so cool. That's good, you know? Because, I mean, I'm sure it's still a lot to process and deal with. I mean, we don't know. Later on, there might still be some ramifications for it. But I think for Adriana, it's just a thing of knowing, like, right, you're my mom. And despite everything, you were working so hard to help me prove that I was innocent. So, despite, everything. So, I don't know. I thought that was an interesting development. Because she also talked about, like, I think, like, her mom got, like, an anonymous donor. I don't know if that was supposed to be like Linda or whether Lucifer made that. It might have just been Linda, but I mean, Lucifer does have the funds. So I don't know if like Linda has like a nest egg set aside. I mean, she is a therapist, so I mean, I think therapists make good money, especially if you're a really good one. I mean, probably like all the therapy sessions Lucifer has with her, she probably gets a paid and absorbent fee for that. Dealing with a lot of celestial issues. So, I don't know. I'm really, really interested to see ultimately where all of this ends up taking us going forward into the next episode as Lucifer makes his proclamation that I'm going to be God. So, we'll see how that ultimately ends up playing out. But really, that's all I'm going to talk about. So, the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day, and goodbye.